the teenage brain. In her insightful book, The Teenage Brain, a neuroscientist's survival guide to raising adolescents and young adults, the author delves into the unique challenges and opportunities presented by the teenage brain. From my personal standpoint, I do not claim to be an expert, save from my own experiences. I do not have children, and my understanding of the teenage brain is greatly influenced by the insights provided in the aforementioned book. The teenage brain is in a critical stage of development and growth. It is capable of remarkable learning, but the exuberance of adolescence may lead to impulsivity, risk-taking, irrational decisions, mood swings, and poor judgment. As adults, we often send adolescents mixed messages during this complex phase. It is our responsibility to guide them through this transitional period and keep them on the right path. Adolescents may appear mature, but their brains are still in the process of developing. Hormonal changes add another layer of complexity to this phase of their lives. Their brains are equipped to signal dangers when a crisis arises. But the frontal lobe, responsible for decision-making and problem-solving, may fail to respond to obvious cues. It is crucial to educate teenagers about the dangers of alcohol and provide them with real-life examples of its harmful effects, thus empowering them to make informed decisions. Teenagers' brains are incredibly vulnerable yet powerful, which makes their behavior often irrational. Alcohol can directly affect the synapses in the brain and memory. The earlier in life and the larger the quantity of alcohol consumed, the more severe the damage can be. Excessive alcohol causes brain cells to die. It's crucial for teenagers to understand the long-term effects of alcohol and question if the temporary high is worth the potential damage. Bias. The perceptions of the majority often seem to be devoid of the experiences of the minority. In my books, I aim to reassure and validate those individuals who don't have a platform to voice their views. We are confronted with the harsh truth that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. These words by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. resonate deeply with me. This notion is further explored in Dolly Chugg's insightful book, The Person You Mean to Be. The reality is that we are not always the person we aspire to be, and I must admit that I too fall prey to this predicament. Most people in our civilization consider themselves to be good, but the reality is that all of us have different realities. Some of us are biased towards a particular minority group. This bias often results from ignorance, a steadfast belief that we are in the right. That's the essence of bias. It's not always intentional, but it's harmful nonetheless. I'm no stranger to this bias. I once offered to help a woman in a wheelchair at a grocery store, only to be rebuked. I realized that I wouldn't have offered help to anyone else in that situation, which showed me that even I am biased against the very group I'm trying to help. It's a stark reminder of how much of a battle we have ahead of us. A revolution requires both heat, extreme movements, novelty, and light, protest at the entry level, resolution, to make a significant impact. While I'm not particularly familiar with protests or rebellions, I have spoken publicly and written books on multiple causes that I'm passionate about. These include disability inequality, anti-drink/drug driving, parenting, society, and mental health. I strive to be as honest as my life realistically permits. I won't deny that I've admitted to my own unconscious bias. However, I am aware that some of the stigmatizing thoughts that cross my mind are disturbing, even though they seem unintentional, primarily due to my uncomfortable history of deep psychological effects. By the time I reached my late 30s, I had grown considerably, particularly in the last 6 months since my very late maturation. During this time, I developed certain identities that I'm not proud of. However, I ensure that these identities have little to no effect on the real world as they remain confined to my mind. Still, I won't deny the possibility that there may be someone out there who is aware of these troubling thoughts. I once quoted Resistance is futile, so I try to resist these thoughts by thinking positively, a method often recommended for counteracting negative thinking. There's nothing wrong with moving from being a good person to a goodish person. It's important to stay on track by acknowledging feelings of unease and guilt. Dealing with shame is difficult, but I believe that my past mistakes serve as valuable lessons that prepare me for entering uncharted territories and contributing to a greater humanity. Stereotypes often share common features such as competitive threat and low warmth. A communal being, on the other hand, exhibits high warmth and competence. High or low status affects groups. Stereotypes of black people, homeless individuals, drug addicts, and people with disabilities are all considered low status and low competence. Psychological safety can sometimes prevent us from acknowledging our biases. However, adopting a growth mindset allows us to introspect, learn by taking risks, and deepen superficial friendships. It's a choice between willful ignorance and willful awareness. Nervousness and ignorance can be combated by adopting a growth mindset. We are faced with another daunting task. The mere words sex and gender are considered unconscious bias. Sex is biological, while gender is social. Binary categories lead to more exclusion, but since all people are excluded from something or the other, we should all strive to become conscious of our invisible biases and improve our self-awareness. This will lead to better individuals and consequently a better world. If we view people as competent, we perceive them as individuals. Low competence or status results in perceptual changes in visual acuity, leading to the dehumanization of others, which is a form of stereotyping. I don't want to be influenced by the warm glow effect and base my work on savior mode or sympathy mode, as these approaches indicate that I'm not reciprocating and basing my work on my own needs. While I disagree with Deepak, I have learned to tolerate my own needs to a certain extent. I feel sympathy for minorities because I am part of this group. I believe in my work and feel that to whatever extent it may be considered savior mode, it will help various groups, from minorities experiencing prejudices and inequality to majority groups grappling with unconscious biases. It encourages engaging in conversations about issues that many are biased about. As a white male, I have some degree of privilege. However, as a disabled white male, my privilege differs from that of women, black individuals, the homeless, drug addicts, or alcoholics. My best intentions are with this book, and I hope that regardless of how you perceive me, you will look at the messages I'm trying to convey. I am doing my bit to improve humanity's dismay. Understanding the complex nature of anxiety. As I delve deep into reminiscing about my past, I find myself grappling with a question that has long haunted me. Did I trigger my own downfall? The answer to this query is far from straightforward. Yes, in one sense, my reckless decision to mix alcohol with driving was the immediate cause of the accident. However, there are underlying factors, unseen yet powerful, that have played their part in shaping my life before the crash and continue to colour my existence today. This accident, as harrowing and distressing as it was, acted as a potent catalyst for a profound transformation in my adult life. 2 decades have passed since that fateful day, a period filled with immense struggle, intense rehabilitation, and countless setbacks. Yet, after enduring all this, I am finally starting to carve out my own personal version of heaven. Anxiety, however, remains a constant companion in my life, an unwelcome guest that persistently refuses to depart. But I persist. I wage a relentless battle, and I endure. I realize that in comparison to others, I am one of the fortunate ones because there are people for whom living with anxiety is so debilitating that it becomes an insurmountable challenge. Anxiety is akin to being trapped in a claustrophobic room where your mind is constantly fabricating the worst-case scenarios. This incessant barrage of negative thoughts can spiral into depression and result in self-imposed isolation and aberrant behavior. Anxiety manifests in different ways for different individuals. For some, it rears its head during particular events such as a job interview or a first date. Now, just imagine experiencing that degree of anxiety all the time, magnified 100-fold. This is the harsh reality for those living with chronic anxiety. It's not a lifestyle choice, but a condition that can gradually erode one's self-confidence and distort personal beliefs. As I've explored in my other books, beliefs wield immense power and can significantly influence one's personality. Some people may be perceived as rude or aloof, but the harsh reality is, even a casual interaction can be a daunting task that pushes them far beyond their comfort zone. In my life, I have had my own protracted battles with anxiety. There was a time when just stepping outside the threshold of my front door or venturing into the next room felt like a monumental task, equivalent to scaling a mountain. Living with anxiety is a complex, often perplexing experience. It doesn't adhere to a set pattern and can be triggered by a multitude of situations without any discernible reason. Attempting to articulate my struggle with anxiety can be incredibly challenging, especially when it involves aspects that are hard for others to grasp. When mystical elements seep into your reasoning, you are confronted with a formidable obstacle that many find incoherent and difficult to discuss. As a result, you tend to internalize your feelings, and before you realize it, years have flown by, and you find yourself living a life that's a far cry from what it used to be. Despite the best efforts of professionals to extend their help, their methods can sometimes feel invasive and lead to defensiveness and disagreement. While I appreciate their sincere efforts, I wish their approach was less intrusive and more respectful of my personal boundaries. Anxiety, whether minor or major, affects individuals to varying degrees. For those who have never lived with mental or physical impairments, comprehending the challenges associated with anxiety can be an uphill task. The simplest everyday tasks can become overwhelming. Watching TV, listening to the radio, engaging in conversations, eating and drinking, stepping outside, and even staying indoors. Even the most mundane activities can trigger anxiety. That exit, that shelf, that packaging, that colour, that car, with them wheels, with that number plate, with that bumper sticker, with that dent, in that place, that name, that design, that washing powder or washing up liquid, that toothpaste, that noise, that voice, that look, that shop, that road sign, that turn, that roundabout, those traffic lights, them roadworks, travelling a certain direction, that number, that till, that clock, with that badge, that shape, and those letters, etc., 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 etc. For me, this includes most brands and things. So how do I navigate through life? It's a struggle, but I'm slowly finding my way through, with minimal dependence on medication. Living with anxiety means having to suppress instinct and impulse, which I've heard can be detrimental to one's health. My coping mechanisms include washing my clothes in plain water, not brushing my teeth, eating and drinking in moderation. You might wonder why I find solace in weak beer, a beverage I'm not even comfortable purchasing. Suppressing my instinct and impulse is not a healthy way to live, but it's the only way I know how to manage my overwhelming anxiety. I find myself pleading, "Heaven help me, please." Life is king. It is the greatest teacher, offering invaluable lessons of resilience and strength, lessons that enhance the richness of our lives. From the invisible to the visible, an extensive exploration of the transformation of unapparent nonsense into undeniable truth, a comprehensive study on perception and reality. When I first embarked on the difficult journey of attempting to enlighten my mother about the myriad of challenges that people with disabilities confront on a daily basis, her initial response was one of indifference. It was as if the gravity of the situation merely brushed past her, leaving no lasting impact. However, Her understanding and acknowledgement of these challenges only began to truly take shape and form when she started observing the intricacies and nuances of my environment in a more detailed manner. Wherever we ventured, she gradually began to take note of the subtle yet poignant reactions of others around us, the unwavering stares that felt almost intrusive, the shifty eyes that would dart back and forth, and the heart-rending looks of pity and disgust, all seemingly directed towards those of us with disabilities. These observations served as a stark reminder of the societal norms and attitudes that we must continually grapple with. However, it was not until she began listening to the heart-wrenching stories of other individuals living with disabilities that she was truly able to grasp the essence of these instances. A personal experience also served as a powerful wake-up call for her. On one occasion, a passerby mistakenly assumed she was inebriated as she was getting out of her car, when, in reality, she was merely dealing with a balance and dizziness complaint. The sheer absurdity and ignorance of this incident left an indelible mark on her perspective. She also had first-hand experience with the dismissive attitude of certain individuals who would engage in conversation with her while completely disregarding my presence, or those who would have unrealistic and uninformed expectations of me. These experiences led to a transformative change in her attitude, unveiling truths that had previously been obscured by societal misconceptions and prejudices. Families of individuals who have experienced trauma or live with a disability will undoubtedly evolve and adapt over time, becoming strikingly different from how they were before the onset of the accident or illness. However, these realities remain largely unobserved and non-existent to the larger community, unless they themselves have personal experience or have faced similar issues within their own family circle. This lack of understanding and empathy is not limited to the general public. Even those who work in day centres for people with disabilities sometimes find it challenging to comprehend stories of societal opposition when narrated by these delicate minds. It's easy to see why there are so many assumptions and misunderstandings about people with disabilities. People with impairments often have a narrower worldview, conditioned reactions, and thoughts shaped by societal pressures that push them into reclusion. My threshold for maintaining composure is often tested, leading to a short-tempered disposition. Simple interactions can trigger this, such as a recent incident in a busy shop where my mother was scanning items at the checkout and I was packing them into bags. As she attempted to hand everything to me, instead of just placing the items down, our interaction became awkward and I lost my temper. I've overheard individuals muttering random words to themselves or even shouting, their behaviour adjusted to fit the societal image of a mentally ill person or a drunk. Such stigmas often result in well-intentioned but misguided advice like, "Don't approach these people," or "Be patient and give them time." These stereotypes often exacerbate the frustration and misunderstanding. Interestingly, the homeless community, despite grappling with its own set of stigmas and societal opposition, often shows more understanding and less judgment towards people with impairments. Throughout my journey grappling with a severe disability, they have been a constant presence and source of support, displaying a level of compassion and understanding that is rarely seen elsewhere. Facts are irrefutable truths. Just as unapparent nonsense can be truths to a minority, often dismissed as nonsensical by the majority. Truths can be ambiguous and hidden from one another, yet glaringly obvious to those directly affected by them. In our interactions with others, it's crucial not to judge, as your truth may differ greatly from theirs. Your understanding of the world might be seen as blatant nonsense to them, and vice versa. Not everyone can comprehend all truths or the nonsensical. Assumptions never equate to genuine learning, no matter how obvious they may seem. Consider yourself fortunate if you find yourself in a good place. But remember that this good place is not an obvious truth. It's more like unapparent nonsense, subject to change in the blink of an eye. As you navigate through the maze of life, make your way while being mindful of the experiences and perspectives of others. Incorporating these into your worldview can only enhance your understanding and empathy towards others. A deep dive into the exploration of individual identity and the intricate concept of free will. In the intricate dance of culture and psychology, we find the deeply complex and multifaceted concept of identity. Each individual, consciously or subconsciously, embarks on a journey to forge their own sense of self within the context of the various groups, communities, and societies they belong to. This fascinating process of self-formation is relentless and persists without pause, irrespective of whether the individual finds themselves in the solitude of their own thoughts or in the bustling midst of a crowd. The identity that emerges from this process, in turn, shapes, influences, and contributes significantly to the social order that surrounds us. Allow me to illustrate this profound concept with a personal anecdote from my own life. Over the course of time, through introspection and reflection, I developed a persona, an echo of my own self, that was born out of the words I committed to paper each day. In these daily musings and contemplations, I found myself oscillating between representing my best and my worst selves, driven by a specific purpose, a need for self-discovery and understanding. This intentional act of self-creation led to the formation of a model of my identity, an abstract construct representing who I perceive myself to be. However, it quickly became apparent that this model was largely fictional, a product of my literacy, creativity, and imagination, rather than a true reflection of my identity. It was only when I stepped out of my own thoughts and started to engage in social interactions, immersing myself in the world outside, that I realized the inaccuracy of my internal model. I had convinced myself of a metaphorical ascent up a mountain of self-discovery, when in reality, my journey was more akin to nearing a metaphorical gutter. Throughout this enlightening journey of self-awareness, I also received what I can only describe as celestial guidance, an otherworldly influence that subtly and gently guided me. This guidance manifested in various ways, such as recurring suggestions and recommendations, or through the wisdom I gleaned from the audiobooks that became my companions on this journey. Interestingly, these audiobooks, which once brimmed with inspirational content and wisdom, now seem to have exhausted their supply of insights. However, this stimulation and guidance were not always welcome. Occasionally, intrusive messages would appear, camouflaged as thoughts, suggesting that I had achieved a state of enlightenment or awakening. Spoiler alert, I hadn't, not yet at least. This introspective journey forced me to revisit my past, to examine both the good and the bad, the triumphs and the failures. I began to question whether I had been guided all along. Was I led to this place by forces beyond my control? Was my journey preordained to bring me to where I am now? Could all the experiences I went through have been necessary stepping stones to my current position? This introspection led me to question the concept of free will. Do we really have free will if our thoughts and actions are constantly being influenced by external and internal factors? I can already hear the objections from some quarters. Yes, I'm aware that freedom exists, but I'm unsure about the extent of its contribution to our actions. Consider, for instance, a thought that leads to action, which in turn results in a feeling. How much of this process is truly under our control? Despite living in a world that champions freedom, I often feel constrained by guidance, ego, and duty. I was led to this point of feeling constrained, yet it was treated as the correct path. I was following an intended route designed for a self that consistently chose the path of most resistance. It might have made things difficult, but the resulting achievements speak volumes about my determination, resilience, and tenacity. My work, the product of my mind and effort, brings me immense satisfaction. It's one of the very few things that brings me genuine joy and fulfillment. I am confident in the value of what I create, and I am positive that those who engage with my work will gain something from it, experiencing their own transformation and growth. I invite you to join me on this journey of self-discovery and learning. Enjoy the process, embrace the challenges, and celebrate the triumphs. Let's explore the fascinating world of the human psyche together. A comprehensive examination, the intricacies and complexities of perceiving reality. As human beings, our mental capacities provide us with a multitude of techniques for representing the world's structures to ourselves. These representations can take many forms, including thoughts, perceptions, beliefs, desires, mental imageries, and language. In this piece, I will delve deeply into each of these facets, sharing my personal experiences that have been shaped by a lifetime of trials, triumphs, and transformation. Thought is an incredibly potent tool. Reflecting on my younger years, I realized that my thinking was rather limited in scope and depth. I was under the impression that I excelled in every endeavor I embarked upon, yet I failed to truly appreciate my own unique talents and abilities. This all dramatically changed following a severe brain trauma, which resulted in the loss of my mental abilities, impacting every item on this list. Despite the immense hardship and setback, I held on, persevered, and gradually rebuilt my life piece by piece. I hope that as I share my journey of rehabilitation and subsequent loss of mental capacity once again, you will gain a renewed sense of gratitude for your own lives and the abilities you possess. Now, I find that sparks of inspired thought flicker regularly in my mind as I traverse the different realities of life, each one offering a unique perspective and lessons to be learned. Perception is a complex and often deceptive thing. I was rather naive during my early years, a period in my life that saw me transition into adulthood, a phase of life that greeted me with disability, isolation, mental health struggles, and an obscure community. During these formative years, I harbored the perception that life was easy and everything would fall into place seamlessly, like pieces of a puzzle naturally fitting together. Interestingly, I received messages, which I initially dismissed as mere thoughts, assuring me that everything would turn out just fine in the end. In those days, I was never perturbed by the future, nor did I contemplate it much. I lived for the moment, indulging in risky behaviors such as drunk driving without giving a second thought to the possible repercussions, the potential consequences of a car crash, the dramatic changes it would bring to my life, and the lives of my family members were questions that didn't cross my mind until decades after the incident. Now I find myself frequently reflecting on the past, which many contend is not the most healthy practice. However, in this piece of writing, I use my past experiences to serve a purpose. I also spend a significant amount of time dreaming about and planning for a future filled with promise and potential. I write about my past not just to relive it, but also to inspire and encourage the emergence of a refusal in the community to experience anything similar to my life. Belief is a powerful motivator. I confess that my initial childish beliefs about the world being a harsh place filled with deceit and untrustworthy individuals have resurfaced. This is after a period of believing in the inherent goodness of people and the beauty of the world. Unfortunately, I have experienced lies and deception, even in what one would consider divine territories. I have journeyed through multiple realities, some divinely crafted, others shaped by personal catastrophes. My earlier perception that disabled individuals always complain and receive preferential treatment was shattered when I was compelled to confront the harsh reality of disability. Desire is a driving force that fuels ambition and aspiration. My aspirations have evolved significantly over the years, shaped by my experiences and insights. While some of my desires may seem unrealistic to some, I have a clearer vision of my place in the future than I ever did before. Language is a bridge that connects individuals, cultures, and ideas. I've always appreciated the art of good conversation and the power of effective communication. However, after my brain damage, I faced significant challenges with language, including word-finding difficulties and temporary speech troubles. Despite these hurdles, I continue to use language as a tool to share my experiences and insights, hoping they can inspire others in their journeys. Poem, Heed. Embrace the creativity, brother. The shadow is withheld, unseen, scamming a connection, an ordinary yet unique encounter. There's turmoil to report, a chaos born from a single place, a single cause. Driven by the intoxication of life, bilingual effects ripple through ongoing centuries. Authors pen their biographs, revealing tricks hidden within the temple's sacred walls. Decipher and abolish, break codes and tear down barriers. It's a place devoid of mercy, but one might wonder, does such a place truly exist? The powerful forces of greed and fear in decision-making. This book seeks to shed light on the complex tapestry of human emotions that significantly influence how humans operate. It is not intended to offend, but to articulate my rationale. It's an interesting dichotomy we live in. We're advised against selfishness, yet our species would not have thrived if there wasn't a grain of truth to the notion of greed. This primal instinct to prioritize oneself and to hoard resources has historically been crucial for survival. Similarly, fear, one of our most basic and primal emotions, plays a pivotal role in our lives. It influences our actions and decisions as we worry about the judgment of others, revealing our inherent need for social approval and acceptance. In the presence of a person with a disability, people often tread lightly, unsure of how to behave. They may form preconceived notions about the person, and as a result, their actions may swing toward being overly kind or excessively judgmental. The acceptable middle ground, where we treat everyone as equals, is less observed. This isn't to say the world is void of genuinely pleasant individuals. However, such people, due to societal fear and pressure to conform to societal norms, are limited in number. Living without the anxiety of what others think is not only liberating, but also a healthy path to personal growth. It is an undeniable truth that it's impossible to please everyone, and thus, adhering to your own honest values is highly recommended. Despite loneliness being a common human condition, we've learned to coexist with it. A person with a judgmental attitude may not even realize their bias. In contrast, a lonely person with ample time for introspection becomes increasingly aware of social aptitudes and their lack thereof. This lack of interaction exacerbates the loneliness, leading to behaviors that may seem out of character. Lonely individuals strive to interact to the best of their abilities, but their circumstances often keep them isolated. They may be grappling with social anxiety. Sure, some prefer quiet solitude, but many, like myself, yearn for the opportunity to build various relationships. If even a minority feels confident in their argument, they will voice it. However, if they anticipate that their opinion will face rejection from the group, they're likely to remain silent. This phenomenon is referred to as the spiral of silence. People may not realize or appreciate that this individual's life may already have been disrupted, and they continue to ruminate on any form of mistreatment, no matter how minor. The person in question may already be vulnerable, and these experiences only intensify their vulnerability. This could lead to defensiveness and insecurity, or less commonly, aggression. They might find it hard to trust, doubt everything, and thus not feel safe. People may not necessarily intend to hurt our emotions, but we often perceive invalidation, even when it's not present. Eventually, we stop reaching out for emotional connection, further reinforcing the reputation we're trying desperately to shake off. This is a scenario that's often obsessed over. The perception of the world is a subjective experience. Your perception of the world will inevitably differ from mine, his, hers, or theirs. A successful world is made up of a variety of individuals, each with their unique worldview. We all perceive different things through our individual lenses. Some may look at a glass of water and see it as half full, while others may see it as half empty. A person stranded in a desert would salivate at the sight of it, seeing it as the ultimate source of refreshiveness, while a fish might be puzzled at how its natural environment can be captured in a glass, as it doesn't perceive water as a separate entity. It's just everywhere when they are in their habitat. In my personal journey, I have come to accept the concept of disability as a natural part of life, shedding the ingrained stigmas I held in my youth. What exactly is a disability, and how does it affect people? The answer to this question is as diverse as our fingerprints. No two people have the same disability or are affected by it in the same way. In a day centre for people recovering from head injuries, for instance, while we all shared the same type of trauma, it affected each of us in unique ways and to varying degrees. Some battled different physical problems, others had speech impairments, and some of us had more severe memory issues than others. Even within a diagnosed category, say autism, there are countless varying scales and effects. And just like anyone else, moods can greatly enhance or detract the presentation of a person with a disability. Our thoughts and perspectives are influenced by a multitude of factors: news, publicity, privacy, societal norms, and what we hear and see. All of these external influences can have a profound impact on how we perceive the world and ourselves. Consider a person with a severe disability, potentially brain damaged. Their thoughts and views could be doubly influenced by the community's reactions, perhaps by stories of other people's disabilities, which could inspire hope. We can all find discourse or desire in another's virtues, actions, and speech. Or perhaps a poster remains in mind. There is a multitude of ways we can be influenced and affected. Given the diverse portrayals and perspectives on a single subject, it's no surprise that it can be difficult for some to define and accept. It brings me great joy to hear that more children with disabilities are being integrated into mainstream schools. I have had many quiet years, not keeping up with current affairs, so I apologise if my writing reflects the past more than the present. However, I guarantee that this book will offer some form of education. You will learn something new. Regardless of how much you think you already know, we all continue learning throughout life, and we all have something unique to teach. Perhaps you think you have no desire to learn about our experiences. But just remember, many of us were once in your place of fitness and may have had similar thoughts. Statistically speaking, most people will, at some point in their life, suffer from mental health issues or physical disability, whether temporary or permanent. Integrating children with disabilities into mainstream schools is a crucial step towards progress. I can't see any other feasible solution to what has been a long-standing issue. In my experience, parents who live close to a child with a disability often gain a deeper understanding and acceptance of the reality of living with a disability. My own mother didn't believe some of the experiences I shared until she began witnessing them herself. Simple causal explanations, old age, accident, illness, are not enough to fully comprehend the daily struggles people with disabilities face. Assumptions can be misguided. Some people assume I must have been born with a disability, or that I must be rebellious or troublesome. But as we all know, it's best not to make assumptions. I certainly don't. I have attempted to explain why advocates still face an uphill battle. Your perspective will differ from hers, which will again differ from a child's or an adult's, and from what a parent thinks. All of these perspectives are likely quite different from what someone with a disability knows and experiences. This diversity of perspectives is part of the reason why the fight for inclusion is such a struggle. As for the question of free will versus determinism, I argue that both are limited. Before I explain my reasoning, let me state that if I can provide a plausible cause, then you can surely understand the monumental task at hand. With both extremes ruled out, there is a lot of middle ground to navigate. The concept of absolute free will is flawed, our decisions are always influenced by external factors. For example, if you're presented with two choices but one of them is not available, then you're left with only one option, a deterministic outcome. Similarly, our habits can also limit our free will. For instance, I used to have a habit of examining car number plates to the point where it felt like they were sending me messages. Now, I try not to pay attention to anything that causes discomfort, but the habit has become so ingrained that I still find myself drawn to number plates. This is surely a form of determinism, a habitual behavior that's been programmed into my mind through repetition. The natural world operates on the principle of the path of least resistance, much like water flowing down a gully, carving a route that offers the least resistance. Humans are no different. When we encounter resistance, our survival instinct kicks in and we become more alert. The mind doesn't like risk, which it senses as resistance. It cannot distinguish between real and imagined threats, leading me to my hypothesis. Disability discrimination, however it's perceived by either side, equals resistance. However subtle, it's a resistance against obligations and regulations. People don't like to have their attitudes dictated by others, but the imagination of a person with a disability can run wild, creating their own reality. This might seem counterintuitive, but there is resistance on the part of the person with a disability too. Resistance to acceptance, communication, and living a normal life. This resistance then determines how you unconsciously react, which can make most people uncomfortable. I speak from personal experiences of a time long ago. Reward is a powerful motivator for an active mind. This message goes out to all those who exploit vulnerability for personal gain, taking the path of least resistance to achieve their goals. I don't need to learn about these people's morals. This book spans many decades with information that was accurate at the time of writing. Why do drink drivers still exist? And why do we still struggle with disability acceptance issues? Almost everyone I've spoken to knows someone who is driven under the influence, and some know people who do it regularly. Disability issues are still prevalent. Just the other night, a woman told me to wobble off simply because I was trying to make friends. The same woman said to me, "Oh, things are a lot better now for disabled people." Yes, things have improved compared to the past, but once you enter this world, your understanding of neglect skyrockets. Is this a realm you'd like to enter? If not, be careful about your actions, as devastation can be easily invited. Another issue I've grappled with is the influence of past thoughts on current ones, which then shape my reality. This cycle continues, with past influences affecting current thoughts, which then alter my reality, and so on. Why aren't we taught in schools about the power of thought and how it can affect every aspect of our lives? If you're living a life of secrets, get real. Someone always knows, and you shouldn't be surprised by the repercussions of your actions. Regardless of the world you live in or how you arrived there, luck and the education and parenting you received have likely played significant roles. So if we want to see progress in our world, these areas need attention. While we can't control luck or parenting, I am advocating for a major overhaul of the education system. Emotional intelligence, which is arguably more important than intelligence quotient, should be part of the curriculum. The world needs to catch up. This is the new millennium. The persistent problem of drink driving, an in-depth analysis. In the complex tapestry of today's world, it is a universally acknowledged truth that none of us consciously entertain thoughts of causing harm to ourselves or others, becoming physically disabled, or even experiencing an abrupt, untimely death. However, the question that arises is, how deeply do we comprehend and appreciate the sheer gravity of this concept? Through numerous interactions with a range of individuals, I've noticed a disconcerting trend. Most of those who have been charged with drink driving offences seem more preoccupied with the punitive measures meted out by the courts, the monetary fines they had to pay, or the driving bans they had to endure. This observation raises a critical question. If there is no valid benefit or justification for the act of drink driving, why does a significant portion of the population still engage in this inherently dangerous practice? The answer, arguably, lies in the deceptive allure of the ease and convenience associated with the act. However, as an old adage wisely states, difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations, and conversely, seemingly easy paths can culminate in catastrophic and devastating consequences. As we progress into this new year, a year that promises unprecedented advancements and a leap in human evolution, it is imperative that we acknowledge and address this treacherous practice that many dare to risk. It's not just about contemplating the dangers. It's about comprehending that our holistic self-worth and well-being should become the primary goal for each of us. We should not neglect our autonomy, for ignoring our instincts or persisting with morally reprehensible or unjust actions and attitudes results in harm to both the perpetrator and the recipient. This harm often manifests in various, unanticipated psychological ways that can deeply impact our mental health. The formidable power of the human mind is immense and can lead to the development of new habits and behaviors if the individual continues to face prejudice and discrimination. When survival instincts kick in, thought, action, and instinctual behavior work in harmony to create new neuronal pathways. This concept is not limited to the recipient. The perpetrator will also experience a shift in their neuronal pathways, potentially exacerbating the undisclosed burden on the other person. Cells shut down, reputations are formed, and the intricate mind-body connection comes into play, affecting both parties' health to varying degrees. An intriguing hypothesis I was introduced to by a scholar who had extensively studied the brain, human behavior, and societal interaction was the notion that people's disabilities could deteriorate, even physically, due to the manner in which society interacts with them. Throughout my rigorous years of study, I discovered increasing evidence to substantiate this viewpoint, thereby transforming it from mere speculation to a scientifically proven fact. Drawing from my personal experiences, I can wholeheartedly concur with this assertion. Upon reflection of my studies, I had a profound realization that I had spent most of my younger years operating in a state of survival mode. This conditioned state of being amplified my astuteness and empathetic abilities. But when confronted with opposition from the community, I found myself having to recalibrate my survival strategies in ways that were unfamiliar and challenging. I began to notice myself adopting thoughts and attitudes that I had previously ridiculed, and even my automatic responsive facial expressions took me by surprise. Each new day presented a unique set of challenges that I had to confront head-on. This all-consuming power of the mind is a potent testament to the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. The collective consensus is that none of us intentionally aspire to live a life burdened by a disability. However, certain actions such as excessive drinking, drug use, engaging in physical fights, drink driving, or reckless speeding are all direct paths towards some form of physical or mental disability and eventually premature death. It's crucial to comprehend and appreciate that a life marked by disability is a vastly different realm of existence compared to any other. Unless one desires a completely abstract and confusing view of social obscurity, with the mind constantly operating in survival mode, it's advisable to act responsibly. Consider spending a bit extra on a taxi, arriving late, or choosing to express affection instead of hostility, and intoxicate yourself with the profound emotion of love rather than the mind-altering effects of alcohol. Isolation, as experienced by those incarcerated, has a significant detrimental impact on their mental health. Any form of disability or deviation from societal norms can result in social solitude, which only intensifies their neuronal fracturing. Living with a disability can be equated to living as a prisoner in a world teeming with people, a deaf individual in a world resounding with noise, or a blind person in a world brimming with beauty. It's a state of existence where the appreciation of another's abilities becomes an insurmountable challenge. The role of social interaction is fundamental for successful development from early childhood and continues to be vital throughout the course of life. I firmly believe that isolation and a lack of social interaction is a more significant cause of mortality and anguish than even harmful habits such as smoking. It's unfortunate that our society often encourages us to maintain a cautious distance from strangers. This preventive advice is passed down to the younger members of society, and due to issues related to mental health or disability, becomes a habitual practice for many adults. This results in an almost structural tendency to ignore our neighbours and community members because we are always in a rush, or simply lack the time or patience for an unassuming casual chat. Regrettably, interactions that do not yield immediate personal gain are often overlooked. This might be a contributing reason why elderly individuals are usually more communicative. They have most likely experienced the bitter sting of isolation and have seen enough of life to understand that there is always something new to learn from forming new acquaintances, and there is always enough time to acknowledge someone, regardless of their social stature. The fabric of society is essential for everyone, including those who identify as introverts and sometimes feel out of place. Misfits are not necessarily introverts. They are often individuals who have been unjustly ostracized by a judgmental community. Unfortunately, many of us are held back by societal oppression, which hinders our potential. Humans are inherently social creatures, and the group's perception of an individual significantly impacts their self-perception. Depending on the status of the observer and the observed, this perception can also work in reverse. A person of high status might influence the entire group in various ways. The expectation is that the individual will conform to the group's norms. This is why people with unique views are often held in high regard. Whether we are aware of it or not, our surrounding environment profoundly shapes us. While there are numerous caring individuals in society, and most of us claim to care about others, few of us take the time to truly introspect and question our virtues and moral principles. If individuals took a moment to recognize what influences and changes their behaviors, they would gain an insight into just how instinctual humans are. For instance, an individual's ingrained attitudes are likely to undergo a shift when they observe the majority behaving in a certain way towards the minority. This phenomenon is encapsulated in the famous saying about one person following the crowd, thereby underscoring the powerful influence of group dynamics.